Now I actually just mucked up the video for removing the stator support. And basically, if you can imagine that still in the stator support, we have this big tap. I don't know what size it is. We've had it for quite a few years, and we've actually ground like a square edge there and like a tapered edge on that side. And what we do is you screw that in, you put the pump in the vise and you screw that in with a big shifter right in as far as it'll let you go, and then we just get a punch and just punch it out, and that'll push that that bush out. You can actually take other bushes, other little bushes out like that same way with a tap, and then you just make sure that these holes are lined up with the little grooves inside the stator support, and punch it back in till it hits a stop. There'll be a little step inside. Before you do that, always mark the little, just scratch a little mark on the notch there where it is located. But it's always a good idea to just align it by eye, just to make sure that that hole is right in the middle of those slots that are inside the stator support. Now I'm just aligning up the holes there before I put it in. Got the notch where it was, and we checked the other side as well. So we can probably move this one over a little bit. There we go. That's pretty square there. We've got this little driver we've made that just fits in there, and trying to get it as even as possible. The big square hammer. Make sure that the notch is up to the top, and you drive that in until it hits a step. There's a step in there, you go right up to the step. We've got a bit of plastic under the newspaper there, so it's not going to do any damage to the splines. And when you get to the bottom, it'll make a slightly different sound, so you know it's hit the bottom. There, you can hear that. That's hit the bottom now. There we go. You can see that the notch slightly to the left, probably about 1/8 of an inch to the left of where it was originally. So I've just aligned it up a little bit better so the holes are matching on the inside there. And we get our no-go tool, the one that goes up to that step. And there you go. It's actually going in pretty tight on here as well. And that is perfect. There we go. we go, we've got the seal, square cut seal there, and a square cut seal on the outside. We've cleaned up the pump, and we're just inspecting the reverse piston because these are prone to cracking. You want to check it on both the inside and outside. Sometimes you get like a little hairline crack somewhere. Because of the size of the piston, the surface area is quite huge, so they do create a lot of force there. So just check that before you do it. Now we've got the O-rings, the new O-rings. We'll just place that in there. Make sure it's seated in properly. And the smaller one, we actually give it a bit of a stretch because it's got to be opened from the inside out. We just give it a stretch and put it into the little groove there. There we go. Put a little bit of Vaseline in there. And on the O-ring. And we carefully just put those O-rings the other way. And you just sort of push it. You got to have pressure on it evenly. And you just slowly work it down. There is a large chamfer in there, so it's a little bit hard to compress the rubber, especially when it's new. And there we go. It's all the way down. Just putting the regulator valve back in. Make sure it finds its own way into its bore. And we've got the reverse boost valve. And we put the pin back in. There we go. Pump's ready to be put back together. You can see that if you're doing that, just be careful you don't damage those sharp edges there. And that spring is a fair bit stronger than what it was. Now we're just going to put a bit of Vaseline in there. And because I've scribed it, I'm going to spin it around. I'm going to put the little X down into the pump. Just going to put a little Vaseline on there as well, so it doesn't seize up when whoever's fitting it might run it dry. So you don't want the pump seizing up. Just for safe measure, I'll just put a little bit of gear oil in there as well. It's a lot thicker than the transmission fluid. We do the same with the driven gear. Put the little scribe mark into the pump. And I just like to align the pins just straight up and down, so when you're fitting it you can actually line up the converter drive lugs a little bit easier. So I'm just going to put a heap of Vaseline in here. A lot of people seize the pump up when they're filling it. They fill the transmission up thinking that there's enough oil in there. I've just run a very, very fine stone just over the end of that where the pump's been wearing. And again, we're going to just put some Vaseline all over that. One, it's good idea to coat it in Vaseline or oil. Even if it's sitting for a while, you can get surface rust, so at least it's not going to rust where the pump is. There we go. And just put a bit of transmission fluid on there as well. There we go. We're ready to move on to the bell housing, and then we're going to bolt and align the pump. Okay, we've got the bell housing. I'm just going to tap out the seal. Here we go, the old bush. Now, because these bushes, or this bush is going into a high performance application, what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a little bit of Loctite on there, on the bush, because they are prone to falling out. Same as the seal. Just the thinnest film you can put on there. It's already held in by the bell housing, but we're just going to do it like that. And I'm just going to put that where the little join is on the bush. I'm going to put that at the top. And as evenly as you can, just punch that in. And I'm just going to go to that chamfer there. It's actually a little bit raised. The bush is sticking out this way, so it's towards the converter a little bit more. I'm just going to put it right on the edge. Good enough. There we go. One other thing to just check, make sure that the spring hasn't popped out of that seal. Okay, I've cleaned up all the bolts. There was all gasket cement all over them, just on the wire brush on the, and I've put these little aluminium washers on, so we don't need to put in gasket cement. Now I've aligned up that separator plate, and now we just line up the holes. Out there. The shorter ones go on the pump on the inside. We just put them all on loosely. And I'm just going to plonk these other ones in just for alignment. Now we've got the little pump alignment tool, and we just plonk that in there. Give it a little bit of a wriggle. In the bolt holes you'll see that it still allows it to go left and right a little bit. And we try and put it about the middle. I'll just tighten that up by hand. It's not real firm, and you want to make sure that alignment tool can slide in and out nicely. We've actually got two different sizes. This one's 1 inch and 874 thou, and this one is 1 inch and 878. So a 4 thou difference. You can, this one gets stuck in there, so we'll just use the smaller one, and that goes in quite well. There you go. Now we're just going to tighten up these inside ones, and that pump is and assembly is ready to go on the case. Now I've just placed the two clutches on the pump assembly, and we can now do an air pressure test on it. Just make sure you're pushing it down by hand or it could pop out. So we'll start with the second drum first, this one, the outer one. You can see that's applying quite nicely. And the third drum, we'll just hold that down. that's working well. I believe these ones are probably for the valve. And with this one over here, that's for your reverse clutch. Just be careful so it doesn't pop out. It shouldn't, but that's working well. So second, third, and everything's working okay. Now making sure you've got the skid plate under that Torrington bearing or needle roller bearing. Just make sure that's all in there. We've wiggled the third drum in. Make sure also you've got that thrust washer in between. And now we're just slowly just holding this because it's the second drum's hanging down on it. There we go. Now we can go about putting the reverse clutch plates back in. Okay, now we're going to start off with the pressure plate that goes into the case. Sometimes these come in aluminium. I like to use these steel ones. There is another one that's actually got hasn't got the step in it like that, but these are the heavy duty ones. You want to use that for a high performance application. So we just drop that into the case there. That should go all the way down to the bottom. Then we start with a steel, and I've just soaked the friction clutch plates. And here's the old ones. You can see you can actually feel the flakiness in them. There's five frictions, and they're about 455 thou. I know that the new ones, they're about 100 thou, 105 thou when they're new. They've just been soaking there in the oil, and they're 505 thou as opposed to the 465. So that'll take up a bit of the delay if there's any delay in the reverse. So I've actually seen these when they wear right down to the steel. Anyway, so we'll go ahead and put these in. And we've got one steel in, and then we just follow it by friction. Steel, friction, steel, and we cap it off with a steel. And we've got this cushion plate. The cushion plate generally goes up against the piston, so don't put it up the other way. And you'll see that it's only got 3 teeth, so you want to make sure that it's located in a spot where it's actually being held in place by the little slots there. Now you might remember earlier in the video when we measured the end float with the input shaft and the output shaft. We can adjust the end float with this little thrust washer that goes on the pump there. So this one, we had 15, remembering that we had 15 thousandths of an inch end float, and this one's 90 thou. So if we find one that's about 95 or 100 thou, we're still good. I think on the Trimatics an end float of about 5 to 8 thou is pretty good. They are pretty tight. They don't have a pushing apart effect as they're operating, so that's why they've even got like this. I'm not sure of the type of plastic it is, but it's like a plastic thrust washer. So we'll just find one that's ideally would be 100 thou, because it will compress a little bit as well when it starts to work. So I'll just have a look if we can find one. A little bit of petroleum jelly on there. Forget to put the O-ring on first. This goes into a chamfer on the case, so the old one will be triangular in shape. So you make sure there's no, because it's a square cut seal, just make sure that it's not twisted when you put it on. We just put that on evenly and just check it like that. Now we'll just double check everything, just make sure you've got your O-ring on, your sealing rings, little thrust washer, and we're just going to put the gasket on as well. So we'll just put a little bit of Vaseline in a few spots, just so it doesn't move around by the time we get it on, and just make sure all the holes line up. Goes that way. Probably need a little bit more Vaseline on it. I'm just going to smear a little bit of Vaseline just on that chamfer, just so that seal doesn't grip on there. It seats nicely on its own. It's nice and slippery. And we slowly just lower it into spot. We don't just let it drop straight down, because you can damage those sealing rings. There we go. Make sure you've got the little washer on there. Put the steel servo in now, but we're going to first just make sure, because I've got a two ring arrangement. You want to always check the rings in the bore first, just make sure everything's okay. And there's probably about 1/2 mil gap there on that one. And there's about the same there. And another thing I like to do is not put the where the joints are in the same spot. I put one on one side and one on the other side. Just going to take the rod and everything off the old piston. Take the nut right off. And then we need to take that circlip off. There is a little bit of a spring there, so just be aware that when you compress that down, it's going to come off. I'm going to actually take it off in our little press, just put a bit of pressure on that piston, just so I can pop that out easier. There we go. I'm just going to put the pressure on it, take that circlip off and let it go. Give that a bit of a wash. we just put all that back together. Oops, alright. Just got to compress this down and put that little circlip back on. There we go. We've got the steel servo piston with the double or twin ring setup. We put the joints of the sealing rings opposite each other before we put it on. Got the circlip on, everything. We'll just put that nut back on there as well. Whoop. And the spring. Now we're ready to put it back in. Now we place it back in just up to there, and we use our ring compressor. And holding it down. Bit hard to do if you're right-handed. We just tap it down and it should just fall in place. That top one hasn't fallen in yet. Just got to take it off and do it again. Going to adjust the band up, set the tension wrench to 40 inch-pound or 5 Newton-meter, and I'm going to back it off 5 turns. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We just do up the lock nut. There we go. I had to take it off again. I forgot to put the pin in there. So it's good practice to check and double check your work just to confirm it, and sometimes when you're doing modification jobs you end up with two of everything on the bench, so it's very important to just make sure, just confirm all those things. You can unscrew this, you don't have to take it all out again. You can unscrew that bolt, slide it out, drop the pin in through that hole. Okay, we're just now I've just put this valve back in, and I'm just about to knock the pin in. I put a new O-ring on there as well. I've just cleaned up the modulator valve and sleeve, and this one has an O-ring on the inside there, so we're going to put a new one in there. A bit hard to see, but the O-ring's in there. Now we just slide that in all the way. Okay, I've got the old modulator here, and it's an adjustable modulator, you can see. We've got this little tool here that it's just basically a pin with some little marks on it that equal on both sides. We put that in there, and here we've got a new adjustable modulator. And then we just push them in. you can see the old one is a lot softer. So by using this tool we can adjust the new one to where the old one was. And here we've just got a standard one with no adjustment in it. You can see it's almost the same as where they've adjusted the adjustable one, their old one. So I'm going to put in just the standard one. Just make sure you put the pin in as well, and the gasket.